Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Zoe Hawkins, and my friend and co-host Jo Wheatley.
Hi everybody, welcome to today's podcast episode. Today we're talking about replacing managers with coaches. We love the title because we thought it was a little bit bold, and we're in that kind of an energy today. But really, this topic idea came from an article that came across, I think it was being circulated on LinkedIn. And it said that a company replaced all of its managers with coaches and employees became 20% more productive and much happier. So we thought we'd talk about that topic today. And, you know, for those of you that are listening, maybe you aren't a trained coach yet, maybe you are a manager. What are your thoughts about coaching? If you think about what are the reasons that as a manager you're interested in training to be a coach, do you recognize something within this article and this title that you're already aligned to?
I certainly remember from my corporate days the impact that managers had on my experience at work. The work was actually never an issue for me. I chose a job because I was interested in the stuff that I was doing, right? So I had an HR career and I always found my work fascinating. Of course, there were times when I started to maybe grow out of interest with a certain topic, but then I'd be able to find different projects or assignments. So for me, the work was never a challenge, but I definitely, even from my very first role, the success of my enjoyment at work was very much down to the manager that I had supporting me. So I can see how, if you had a coach, you know, somebody who had done self-development, understanding of themselves, understanding of their own sort of triggers and responses and needs, how that could have a very, very different impact on the experience that I may have had at work at any different particular times. How about you, Jo? What's your reflections?
Yeah, I think for me, my experience of having a coach is that they're there for me. When I think about my experience of having a manager, I feel that they're there for the organization. And I really feel that. So if in this example that we're talking about, if actually I was working in an organization and my manager, you know, they're not there to manage me. I mean, to think of the wording that we have of these titles, but instead they were there to coach me, and maybe a blend of coaching and mentoring, depending on their level of experience. I personally would enjoy that dynamic much more. And so some of the figures that were quoted in this article were that according to Gallup, employee engagement dropped to a 7-year low last year. Only a third of workers reported feeling engaged at work, with 18% describing themselves as actively disengaged. And, you know, we've heard terms like the Great Resignation, and what that has meant is, you know, people leaving organizations in droves. And we know that COVID has had a big impact where people have been shifting their ways of working, you know, lots more people working from home or hybrid working, which really suits some people, but is a harder adjustment for others. But the main reasons that were driving that trend were employees not feeling valued by their organization. So 54% of people identified as feeling that. 52% identified as not feeling engaged or valued, not feeling valued by their manager. And 51% not feeling a sense of belonging at work. So, you know, when we talk about, managers having coaching skills, it's moving away from the telling, you know, approach. Not all managers tell, obviously, but when we think about a coaching approach, it's asking more open questions, you know, helping the client to explore their strengths in relation to their goal or the challenges that they're feeling, being able to trust that there's value in their experience of learning along the way. Some people need to learn through experience, you know, others learn in different ways, but helping, I think, the individual to also learn about how do they learn best.
Yeah. The manager has a huge influence on the experiences. And as you were talking there, I was kind of thinking, well, you know, the organization doesn't value me. Well, the organization is made up of people, you know, so that again emphasizes the importance of the people that you have in your system. And so how do you create an environment where value is an inherent part of your culture? And I guess this proposal is that you bring coaches to the mix. But if we take it back from like utopia, like, yes, great, let's all become coaches. In reality, there are times when people will need to be told what to do because a coaching approach isn't going to work. Like, you can imagine somebody brand new to a job who's never sort of done this task before, and you're being presented with, well, how do you think you should approach it? I really don't know. That's why I've come to ask you. I simply don't know where to get started. Well, where could you get started? I really don't know where to get started. Like, there are times where some direction can be really, really helpful. And as I've been sort of listening to some of the things you were sharing, I was like, is there a continuum in this organization? We don't know because it's a case study, where there is active mentoring and then at the other end, active coaching. And we know through, training and development, it is quite hard to dance that continuum. You tend to have style. You tend to veer towards somebody who is a mentor, who likes to give advice and likes to provide solutions and share their experience. And obviously at the other end, you've got the non-directional coaching, which is, the client has all of the resources and the answers. And I think both are really important in organizations. It's a utopia, I think, to just have coaches, but I think we also need to honor and respect that there will be times and situations where direction is useful to the client. So you need some highly skilled coaches, I think, to be able to dance that continuum successfully and judge the moments where mentoring could be more valuable than coaching. And of course, the way that you would do that is contracting with the person that you're with at the time. Like, what would be most helpful to you right now?
And I think there's a big part of this, which is, of course, just, we say, this is the title, is it replacing managers with coaches from this article? That alone is not going to be the change. Actually, where this came from is the organization surveyed the people that they were recruiting and asked them what did they want from a manager, and the approaches that they were listening, if the organization felt, were more aligned to what you'd expect from a coach than you would traditionally expect from a manager. And so they didn't only replace the managers with coaches. And what does that mean? Does that mean the job titles? Does it mean giving them additional training? So there's more exploration of that, but it's really, it's a cultural shift, I think, that we're looking at. And ideally cultural shifts, I think, are stimulated from the workforce rather than a top-down approach. So you're exploring, I think, it's ideal to just constantly be in conversation with the workforce about the emerging needs, and wants. And so in this particular organizational case study, they gave people an allowance, a monthly allowance for courses, and, they supplemented it in other ways. And so, as you were describing in the conversation example you were giving, Zoe, was like, well, employees don't always know how to be a coachee, how to be coached. Because if they've always worked in organizations where they're expected to go to their manager at certain points and for certain things, and the manager makes the decision, and all of a sudden they're faced with a dynamic of, without even being told, actually, you get to make your own choices. I'm here to support you. It's okay if you make mistakes. I'll support you to learn from it. That can be quite a shock to the system. And it could also, if not managed well, create a culture of distrust and feeling that things have changed so radically. Are they going to change again? Or we're always changing things, so I'll just wait until it's all settled down. So how do we support the conversations in organizations? We know one size does not fit all for anything in life. So as you were saying, I think the question is perhaps more, how can organizations support all of the people in the organization to be able to learn about their own needs and be able to engage in productive conversations with those that they're in contact with about how they can best support each other to be successful. I also saw something recently, and it reminded me of things that I had talked about in organizations I've worked in before. So somebody posted a picture and he had, let's say, 8 different A4 sheets like next to his computer on the wall, and it had basically information about how that person liked to be engaged with, how to get the best out of me. And so that was a useful reference point then for the individual. If they thought, right, I need to work with this person, or we need to achieve this together, rather than just thinking, well, I'm just going to go and we're going to work together and that'll be, I'm not going to give much thought to it. It's being able to reference that and see, this person would really appreciate that. And so I'm going to think about that as we begin working together on this. And it got shared so many times, thousands of likes. And I thought, I've worked with managers in the past where we've, doing team development activities. And when you start to invest in it, you realize how little, not only do people realize how little do they know about each other and the way they like to work together, but also how little they really know about themselves, because they haven't given opportunities to either think it's important or to really get to the heart of what makes them uniquely them.
I've worked with managers in coaching or leaders in coaching who work for organizations who have software where everybody does some personality profiling and talks about their values and what's important to them. And that's uploaded to a central system. So a line manager is able to log in and have a look at, look, Joe Smith's values are this, that, and the other. Mary's values are this, that, and the other. And this is how I need to be working with them. And it gives the opportunity for people to express, this is how I like to work. I suppose the challenge with that is creating the time and space then to be able to genuinely use it. Because what we see in many organizations is managers don't really have just a management role. They have their day job where they need to do all the doing and they need to manage the team. And I suppose what we're talking about here in the context of putting a coach in place is that coach has the time and the space to dedicate to the team. That's how I certainly imagine the role of a coach anyway. It's like, I'm a coach. My sole purpose is to be there and motivate and engage and support and guide through coaching the people who are doing the job. Well, if you took all the day job away from the managers and simply enabled them to have time and capacity to have regular one-to-ones and follow-ups and, development sessions and support, probably managers could do an amazing job of that too. So, it's a little bit of everything, isn't it? And what you said very early on in this conversation around a coach is there for me and a manager is there for the business. I was like, I wonder if we lived in this utopian world where managers were replaced with coaches, does that create a conflict of interest? And who is the organization? Who is the business? I don't have the answers to those questions. I was just kind of surfacing in me. If there are coaches purely in the role to lead teams who are there for me, is that a conflict of interest with the business? And I don't know who the business is. Maybe it's shareholders. Not sure.
Well, kind of just exploring that. I think it's about whether you're engaged as an employee or not. So we know that yes, you might want to have a high level of retention in your organization, but if you're retaining people that don't really want to be there, it's not a healthy place for them to be anymore, whether there just isn't a values alignment or it doesn't fit in some way. And if things can't be adjusted, then that can reduce productivity. So for me, it's like, if you're there for me as my coach, I'm there with the energy of like, I want to do my best for the organization, for my peers, and I want a role that's going to enable me to live my best life outside of work. And I'm going to give 100% in my working role. In our roles as external coaches, in our terms and conditions, we talk about we cannot predict the outcome of coaching, and it may result in the coachee leaving the organization. It's not the purpose of coaching, but just recognizing that is an outcome in many cases, but often is about how to support people if they decide that they want to leave because they're discovering there isn't that fit anymore. They get to leave well, and focus on those things. I was thinking earlier about like the role of a project manager. So I've been coaching a client who is a project manager, and the client has been bringing some of the challenges in the relationships with the people on the project, but also with peers around it. And, the topic of not being an expert, in the thing. So you're responsible for this project. You've got a number of individuals delivering on it. They are subject matter experts, and your role is not to be a subject matter expert, but it can be feel disempowering for the project manager because individuals in that team are subject matter experts that are so versed in their field, their language that they speak in their field. And what happens when the project manager is asked questions and they don't know the answer to it? And how does the individual cope with that? What beliefs does that activate or trigger? How does the individual want to show up in those situations? And, you know, I've been in a similar role in the past too. And it can be challenging because you are there for your people management or your coaching skills, as well as your technical organization skills as well. So again, there, Zoe, we've got that blend of like the day job, but also the fundamental people skills. I
was just going to say that's where my thinking was starting to go. And I was reflecting on clients that I've worked with who are stepping into very senior leadership roles, who have come through the organization, perhaps, or certainly through that career trajectory, where they've had individual contributor roles, become known as an expert, and then they step into this leadership role. And suddenly they don't need to be an expert. They need to rely on the expertise of the team beneath them to know what is going on through the organization. That's a significant transition from being all over the detail and all over everything to a couple of steps on in your career and just having a high level strategic view of the organization. And when I think about coaching, and I think about those engagements that I've had where I've found myself working with people in an industry that I know nothing about, there is that moment of like, oh, this feels very unusual, like the content-free sort of angle of coaching and corner of coaching, where you don't need to know anything about the story, the data, the detail in order to be able to coach the person and the impact and the challenge that they are experiencing. That's a radical change in thinking for organizations who typically will appoint based on experience. You know, there are times when my husband was transitioning from the military and he was looking at different job adverts, and most job adverts still look at X amount of years of experience in, you know, they are hunting out deep expertise. I don't see anybody hunting out pure leadership, pure coaching, you know, and thinking, oh, we can train the technical side if we need to. Those roles, I think, are very, very rare.
Well, there are some great head of coaching roles, and
well, that's true, but you still need expertise in coaching to be a head of coaching.
So. Yeah, and I think it's easy to say, oh, we want you to take a coaching approach, but how is an organization supporting individuals? And that's really where we got to designing our program, which is to support leaders to step into and develop a coaching skill set. It's not to say they don't already have a degree of coaching skill set. We know all of the learners that come onto our coaching qualifications, let alone this leader as coach training program, have those skills. You know, they've brought them to it, but it's about how can we support people to deepen their expertise, and that involves working on self as well as developing that skill set. And it's the combination of those two things that I think really make the difference. And we always provide demos of conversations because we know it needs to make sense in the context that leaders are working in, rather than from a purist coaching approach. So all of our demos are us drawing on either our current or our previous experience, or examples that come up in our work regularly. And so they can see those conversations and how to put the coaching approach into practice in those everyday scenarios that crop up.
Yeah, and that's a program that we currently run internally for organizations. We create an ability to take units of different coaching trainings to design bespoke facilitation, maybe add on coaching. You know, it's a very flexible program. So if you're listening to this and you're an HR decision maker or leadership development decision maker, and you've been thinking about putting in place some leader as coach training, then feel free to reach out to our team at info@igcompany.co.uk, and we'd be happy to talk you through how that might be a good fit for you. So thanks for listening to this podcast. We hope you found the topic of replacing managers a fascinating one. I think in conclusion, there's no risk that all managers are going to be wiped out from organizations yet. But I do believe there is a strong case for managers gaining coaching skills, certainly for their everyday roles. And we love welcoming leaders onto our coaching the fully fledged coaching training qualifications for those who are deeply passionate about supporting people both inside organizations and beyond organizations in that transformational learning space. So do get in touch if that's you.